Hi again, welcome back to China Manufacturing Decoded, episode 161 today, as we reach towards the end of April 2023. It's Adrian here, and Renaud's with me for this one. Hi, Renaud.
Yeah, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. So we have an interesting topic, right?
Yeah,
A bunch of topics.
sort of, yeah. On this particular episode, what we're going to do, we're going to go through a number of questions that people who are developing new products often ask. So we're going to go through about half of them in this episode, and then in the next episode, we'll cover the rest. I guess there's going to be little offshoots and little extra points and things like that that we'll be throwing in as you go through the questions and answer them. But I suppose no matter if you're an entrepreneur or a medium-sized business or whoever, if you're developing new products and aiming to get them manufactured abroad, these sorts of questions, the answers that you're going to give are going to be really helpful. So starting off with the first one is, what is the target market for the product that you're developing?
That's actually, that's question number one. It makes sense that they would come up so high on the list.
Mm.
And that's really for companies that want to develop a new product, right? And we're thinking, not just a like another kind of t-shirt or with just a different design, right? But like a new kind of electronic product or a new kind of whatever. Okay, some kind of widget that would do something in a different way from the current ones. So what's the target market? A lot of people say, oh, I have this great idea, like I'd love to have this. Okay, so you're doing it for yourself? Right? So first thing is really, what's the target market? Who's going to want that and want to pay for it, right? So you want to see there's two levels always. There's problem, solution, fit. So who has a certain kind of problem or a certain kind of desire, and then what is the right solution that will be a good fit for that problem, right? And that's not sufficient. There's a lot of very nice products that would be great for me, but maybe I don't have the willingness to spend on them, right? Maybe it's too expensive, maybe I have some other priorities in my life, whatever, right? So if you develop something for me, but I like it, it solves some of my problems, but I have some other problems that I want to fix first, and it's just not worth putting money in, then you don't have product market fit. You don't have a market. Okay, a market is a number of companies or people, right, that hopefully you can identify and reach out to, and that have the budget for your product. If there's no money, there's no market. Okay, if there's a bunch of people but they have no money for your product, it's not a market. So you really need to think of all of that at the same time, and it's very important to talk to people, not just think, oh well, my uncle is like this, and like, yeah, it seems like it's really a pattern and I can extrapolate that, and there's millions of people with that same problem, right? Or yeah, my friend has that company and they're looking for that product, and he's a plumber, and there's hundreds of thousands of them out there, and all of them need it. But maybe not. Maybe you need to go out and talk to some other plumbers and see, okay, so what you have sort of an hypothesis, right? And you want to talk to them to see if really they would be interested in and willing to pay for the product. And there's an art to that, right? There's a book called The Mom's Test, like asking your mom. There's a lot of things about that, about how to interview customers and so on. But really, what's the target market is super important, because also you need to narrow it down. A big mistake that people make is that they say, oh yeah, the market, like if I make a better toothbrush and I sell it on the Chinese market, and like if I only get 1% of the market is huge, it's already a big business, right? No. This is really the wrong way to look at it. In most cases, you're much better off picking a segment of the market and maybe a sub-segment and say, okay, this is really the folks that we want to target. We want to do everything with them in mind, right? All the communication, all the product design, all the everything, the user manual, everything will be written with these kinds of people in mind. Okay. And the last point on this topic about the target market is some companies, develop a new product and they have a lot of ideas, and then they say, well, we'll have like a B2B channel and a B2C channel. And the B2B is going to be these companies and they will distribute it to their own customers and they will do this, they will do that. And this is the kind of value that we'll get out of it. And then we'll also sell directly to consumers. And then it will work like this, like this, like that. That's really difficult. Okay. You get to pick one and just become really good at that. Now, your version 1, 1.1, 1.2, or version 2 are doing good with that primary target, and you see that another kind of very different kind, maybe you really target B2B, but you see some B2C are interested to sell it. Okay, then you can start to see, well, how can we do? And maybe they would need actually different products or really, it will take more resources. So be very careful at the beginning. Don't pick two different targets. You're just going to spread your ammunition. Right? You need to pick one segment, go after it with all the powder you have, and just attack that one target market, that segment of the market, and it's you got to put everything on it, right? It's Geoffrey Moore in his classic book Crossing the Chasm. He says, hey, it's like the invasion of Normandy, right? June 1944. You put everything you have on one little piece of Normandy. Okay, well, you have too much. It can be just one beach, but it's going to be a bunch of beaches not too far away from each other, and boom, everything at the same time, same day. That's the analogy. Okay, you don't try to attack different markets at the same time. You attack one market. So that's I hope I provided a bit of a response here on this question.
Yeah, that's good. Let's say you're an entrepreneur and you've got an idea and it's a really positive product idea, and you want to go out and you want to start doing this sort of market research. I mean, you've got your information, you've got your briefcase, you get in your car, let's say. What would you do? What would you personally do? How would you get started with that?
There's certain things you should do probably even before you start to ask questions to people. So first, if you can actually go with your car, like physically go to some people, that's based on the assumption that, yeah, for example, it's a product for plumbers and you want to see them in the field and ask them some questions and so on. Okay, maybe you even go to one of these stores with specialized hardware stuff that plumbers go and buy and so on, right? And you're there and you ask some questions when you see a guy with that kind of van coming out and buying that kind of stuff. Okay, you just go and ask him some questions. Okay. In some other cases, you do surveys, you do interviews, and so on and so forth. But you start by asking, like, we should pick an example here. You're saying that these maybe the copy machines, commercial copy machines, are no good. I'm saying that because I see one just outside, just right here. The copy machines, they have this and this problem, and it's way too big, way too bulky, way too expensive. And okay, then you have an idea that small offices, they want a more compact copy machine, and then you have an idea for that copy machine that would do this, and that's it. But it will also do this new thing that no current copy machine does. Okay, so what you want to do is actually observe. Okay, you have this theory that's relatively small businesses, let's say 0 to 10 people, they use it that way and that way, and they don't use the other features. But the first thing you want to do is go and actually observe if they use these other features and ask them questions about what they do most often, and of course any issues they have with the current copy machines, anything that they wish that it had, and so on. Way before you actually say, hey, but I have this idea, we could also do this and do that, because then they're gonna be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, that would be great.
Mm.
Like zero
Mm.
commitment, just to say like, leave me alone. I give you a positive answer. This is more like, let let me go. I've already spent 5 minutes. I don't want to talk to you about that. I have some other things to do. Oh, this is a great idea. Great.
Mm.
Yeah, let me know when it's ready. But zero commitment for nothing. So it's much safer to get to the right conclusion and avoid making mistakes. Is much better to just say, okay, what do you use? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? How often do you use that? How many people in the office use it? Right?
Mm.
And then if you say, I don't know, the copy machine should also like if I click on that button, it would automatically, I don't know, staple the bunch of paper together like that in that way, which is really cool. Oh,
Mm.
okay. But then you ask, instead of saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the copy machine did that? Of course, they'll say, oh, yeah, it would be cool. But again, no commitment, nothing. So it's really a waste of time to ask these kind of things.
Mm.
But
Mm.
you say, okay, so how okay, first, do you sometimes have a need to bundle the paper together? Maybe you don't even say staple because maybe they have other ways. There's like clips and things like that. And how do you do? And is it easy? Any problem with that? Or is it even a problem? If it's not a problem at all, people have solved it in a very easy way, and they totally like they don't care about it. It's totally a problem solved. Or if they never do it, well, you get the information you wanted. Okay, this business here doesn't need it. And if you go and observe that, you get the information from 20 different businesses, and all of them, or 15 of them, is pretty clear that they don't have the problem, and the other five, they have an easy solution, and they really would not change the copy machine for that,
Mm.
or it's really not a problem for them.
Mm.
Well, you get to your conclusion, and you saved yourself a lot of grief, yeah, a lot of investment for nothing, a lot of time
Mm.
wasted, right? It's great to know about that. But and you say, oh yeah, when you say, well, so what kind of problems do you have, and so on, and you say, well, this stuff sometimes is like I'd like to just load the paper once, and with many more, and just forget about it, and
Mm.
it could be whatever, right? Or the way to change the ink stuff, it's messy, and like my it is dark. I mean, it makes my hands dirty. And so, okay, well, if this comes up very often, you might want to try to redesign it in a better way.
Mm.
If you see that that's really a pain point, if you see it's really a pain point.
Well, that
So
that kind of brings us on to question number two, right? Because,
yes,
and I
yes,
I understand where you're going with number one. So, number one, I mean, it's you got to really understand your market that you want to go into before you even really start going into your product and the solutions. But
yes.
question two is, what problem does the product solve for the customer? So you've already kind of touched on that, but let's go into that a little bit more.
Right. And here you have sort of two big options, right? Is it a type of product and a type of target market where the aesthetics of the product is gonna play an enormous role, or is it a market where the product's got to do its job, fulfill its function, and that's it, and that's the most important by far. Okay, you have these kind of two
Mm.
opposites. So I don't want to give very general answer here, but in a way, it's the same thing. It's solving a problem, whether it's doing something or looking good or what, right? I mean, the people who bought the Tesla Model S, it's a very sexy car, and maybe they were just bored and they wanted something new and kind of unique and show that they are an early innovator. That's the problem they want to fix, right? That's the value they get out of the car, and then they can also rationalize it
Mm.
and say, oh yeah, my car has zero emission, zero direct emission, of course. Like I'm helping this cool company, they're gonna save the planet, and the founder wants to go to Mars to save humanity, and it even gives them, so it makes them feel good because they're a bit bored and they want to have a cool car, to be ahead of the pack, and it also gives them a story to make them feel good. So, very well done, I would say, from a marketing point of view.
Yeah.
And to take another example, maybe when Excel, the spreadsheet software, and Lotus 123 before that, when they became sort of killer apps in the 80s, well, what problem does it solve for the customer? They can just drop the calculator and drop the earlier spreadsheet software. They're pretty limited and do much more, right? But at the same time, it's also like, hey, you can do the cool stuff. Maybe in your office you're the only one who knows how to do that, and if you can do something quickly in 2 or 3 minutes, the other ones were like, wow, how did you do that? Like, it would take me a lot of manual work. All of that was like extended automatically and blah blah blah. This is amazing, right? So very often you have both. You have the utility side, and you have sort of the bragging rights, or the more emotional kind of utility, right? Functional versus emotional, right? If you can have both that resonate with your target market, wow, that's great. Okay. So yeah, not every product is a copy machine. Yeah, a copy machine just has to do the job, right? And not break down, and the repair guy needs to be available very fast when it breaks down, and so on. You need to be able to lease them rather than buy them, and so on and so forth. This is very, very functional. Nobody really feels good, like, emotionally, when looking at a copy machine or interacting with a copy machine.
I suppose not.
Right? Or I guess they would not be in these colors, or in these shapes, in that case. So, but computers were like that in the 90s until the iMac, right? When Jobs came back, and with IF, they say, oh, let's do something really colorful. It really worked pretty well around, when was that, 98, 99, right? And now it's back to everything gray and black anyway. But yeah, it's when you're in an industry where everything is very, very functional, maybe you inject a little bit of emotional, or a lot of emotional, and it might be a hit with some kinds of customers. And when everything is very emotional, and maybe you inject a bit of extra functional, and again, you might get a hit with some customers. Yeah. So what problem does the product solve for the customer? Okay, first, who is the customer, right? Decision maker, the user, the economic buyer. In companies, there's different people who are the customer, right? And you need to be able to be approved maybe by all of them, like the influencer and whatever. The purchasing folks will try to negotiate something, get their pound of flesh, and so on. So the first thing is, who is the customer? Or in medical devices, you have the patient, and you have the user, and so who's really the customer here, right? Very often it's the person, like the nurse, more than, if it's in a hospital setting, more than the patient. But the patient should not be too, like, scared about vibrations or noise or the appearance of a big machine, right?
Yeah.
So we look at the functional MRI scanners for kids now. Some hospitals sort of decorate them with a bunch of stuff. It's like, you're a pirate, and you're a spy. You're going into this to listen to stuff, and then they're like, oh, can I go back into it, right? But otherwise, they're like, oh, I don't want to go into this big thing, and like, I'm claustrophobic or whatever. It's horrible, right? They refuse. So you need to think of all these components of the customer. Okay, and yeah, what problem does it solve? Also, a big thing to keep in mind is your product going to be vitamin versus aspirin, right? If it's just vitamins, well, it makes it, it's sort of a desire. Hey, it's cool to have these kind of things. And for example, you see these backpacks who come out and like they had, the company has a sales page of 3,000 words and a bunch of photos and a lot of things, and like it's waterproof, and it got some special air sort of cushions so you can drop it and nothing will be broken, and it's got this against theft, and it's got this, and it's got this, and it's got that, and it's got that, and yeah, it's a $400 backpack. Yeah, okay, all of that is cool, but it's vitamins. It's nice, but I'm not actively looking for a better backpack. When my backpack gets a bit old, maybe I like the way it worked. I'm just going to look for the same kind of backpack from the same brand or something, right? A lot of people are like that. So that's an example. An aspirin, it means you have a headache. Okay, and you are looking for that thing, right? So for example, a lot of people are moving around with their laptop during the day. They go somewhere, and then after 6 months, they've done a number of cycles, charge, discharge, and the battery is at maybe 50% already of its original capacity. And they like to have a bunch of applications running at the same time and so on. And to them, it is a problem that they only have maybe 3 hours of useful lifetime of the computer. Well, all right. So some people are actively looking for, even if it's a big bulky, big power banks that can send 75 watt into their MacBook Pro, right? And these people are ready to spend the money for it. They're not trying to be cheap. So if they're really looking for it and they would say, oh, whatever, okay, $500, yeah, I'll buy it right now. That is an aspirin, okay, because they have a headache. So pretty important to think of all that. A lot of companies don't think too much about it, and as a result, they go way too early into designing and prototyping and so on. But a lot of the market research and a lot of the planning and the thinking, and to reduce the risk can be done early on. And it not only does it reduce the risk, but it really, it reduces the chance, the risk of failure. But the other way of looking at it is it increases the odds of success and of higher sales and better profitability and so on, right? It's really something that people skip. And that's a big mistake often.
Good. Okay. Yeah, that's a good warning there. And let's continue on to question 3 then at this point, and still talk about the product, of course. What is the unique selling proposition, USP, of the product? Another important one.
Yeah, that's an important one. But if you have a good idea about your target markets and you validated that they are looking for a solution to a certain problem, okay, that the product will solve, and that they're willing to pay some money for it. This is, let's say, this question often will have been answered in an obvious manner, right? So if you go to the trade show these days in Hong Kong or in Guangzhou, right? We're recording on April 20, and it's the middle of the trade show season here. And you go there and you have some product categories and we discussed that a couple of episodes ago, you can find 40, 50 different companies that have a booth with the same kind of product, very, very similar, right? But these guys are not asking themselves this question. They're just saying, oh, okay, there's a mass market. Let's try to get some nice prototypes. We'll put them on the website and let's see. And then if some people think it's nice, it's cool, and we'll just try to make it maybe a nicer color or slightly different shape, and let's see, right? It's kind of the this approach, throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks. Really, that's what they're trying to do. Well, I'm not going to surprise anybody, right? Chinese suppliers, just suck at marketing. This is not what you should do. Okay, if you are in Australia, USA, Canada, Europe, these kinds of places, and you want to sell on your market, you have an enormous advantage. You can actually talk to your target market. You can observe what they're doing, what their problems are, etc., right? So you can think of a product, maybe tweak an existing product, maybe make an entirely new product that will respond to that problem in a better way, in a different way, in a cheaper way, whatever, right? But don't do don't fall for the Canton Fair syndrome.
Well, you probably don't have the benefit of having your own sort of OEM or ODM factory that can just pump out something that's, in a hot category very, very quickly to just test it.
Right. But also, it's just dumb. But anyway, what I'm saying is that you know your market, and you should be able to think of something that can respond to the needs of the target market, etc., and doesn't exist, or that does it in a different way, right? Again, that's different, could be better, could be cheaper, could be faster, could be whatever, simpler. Maybe this one is for old people because there's nothing that really meets their needs, with a very clean interface, big icons, big buttons, very clear, and we add something to detect if they fall or something like that, right? Again, if you identify target market and problem to solve, usually the unique selling proposition will be sort of, more or less obvious, but spend a lot of time on the first two questions.
Okay. And again, related, question 4, what features and functionalities should the product have? I mean, you've kind of covered this already in some ways.
Right. So, but this is an important one because so again, if it's clear what the target market is, if it's clear what the problem to solve is, this will sort of come naturally. However, there's some pitfalls here. There's really some pitfalls. So people tend to think, okay, I want it to be to do this and to do this, and then they keep thinking about it, the back of their mind, and like, oh, it would be nice if it did that also, and if it's and this and this and this, right? And then they come up with a product description that's really complicated. Okay, and it's version 1 of the product. Well, that just doesn't make much sense. So I usually remind people, hey, who's the best marketer of hardware products? Look at Steve Jobs. Well, for the iPhone, or if iPhone 1, he just decided on a date and he said, we're going to ship on that date, whatever, we're going to ship on that date. And then there's certain things that didn't make the cut, they didn't have time to do it. Like, for example, you could not even do copy and paste. Version 1 of the iPhone 1 could not even do copy and paste, among many, many other limitations. Who cared? It was a breakaway success, right? Because they focused on, a all glass display, no keyboard, and so on and so forth. A few things like that, a very simple, clean interface that a grandmother can understand, totally different from the Symbian. And I mean, there were some operating systems for phones that were just horrible. Right? And they focused on the few key differentiators. They implemented it nicely, and that was sufficient. And then, version 2, version 3, version 4, blah, 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 the Pro and the XR and the whatnot. And, they keep pushing the envelope over time, and they make the product, better and better in a way. Well, more and more expensive also, but, bigger and so on, right? But better and better for their business, right? They're really at the point where they need to keep their users happy, but hey, they got to get some cash, right? So they got to keep the investors happy and all that stuff. So you can really feel it, right? So, okay, but when you launch your company and your product, that's sort of what you have in mind also anyway. So that it's not a bad example. The iPhone is not a bad example. So that's really the number one mistake when thinking of what features, what functions, what, keep it as simple as possible for the target market to confirm that it solves a problem and they're willing to pay the price. Because you add that other function and that other function, and then the time to develop is already double, and the cost, all the engineering design and buying the components here and there, put prototypes, test the prototype, all that stuff is multiplied by 2, by 3, and so on and so forth. And then it goes into tooling. It's more complicated. Okay, and then it goes into pre-production runs, and everything is more complicated. So there's all kinds of little issues. Instead of having 20 components, it's got 50 components, including 10 custom design components. Ouch. Well, right now, with that kind of heavy customization of a lot of things in your product, there's all kinds of little things that come nagging at you and wasting your time, wasting your resources. Everything is slower, right? And there's no way to avoid it. The more complex, a more complex product is less reliable, because there's just more components, and one of the components fails, the whole thing doesn't work as well or stops working. The whole product is more likely to have quality issues, just because instead of having maybe just the enclosure to be custom designed, you also have these 3 other parts inside that are custom designed. So anything custom designed is more likely to come with quality issues, and then the assembly, instead of being a relatively simple assembly, pop 30 seconds done, is now 2 minutes, including these 3 processes that are a bit not that easy, where people are fumbling a bit and so on, and maybe it doesn't click nicely. People are never really sure if it worked, if it got in place properly, and so on. I mean, do you want that, right? For your version 1, what we always tell clients is, think of the roadmap. It's good to have a long roadmap, but don't try to make it come true right away in your version 1. Nobody does that. It's just insane. It's just insane, right? And also, another aspect to this, the other side of this is, do you need your version 1 to be a fully custom designed product, right? What I tell people often is, you're just launching your business, so you're going to at the same time learn how to do distribution, how what kind of customers you're going to work with, etc., and at the same time you're gonna have to do all of that engineering design work, and you're gonna have to finance it, and so on and so forth. So you're piling up the cost, the risk, the uncertainty. Wow, maybe you pick an existing product, work with an ODM manufacturer to tweak it a bit, but keep it relatively simple. It's got to be at least 80% the same product as original. Okay, otherwise you build too much. You're starting to build a big castle on a beach, a sand beach. That's no good, because you work with an ODM, right? An ODM, they have their own original design manufacturer. They say that the product is theirs. Okay, it's never going to be your product, and you will always be more or less a distributor. Okay, so you can't do too much. You can't invest too much there for your own sake. But the good thing is, you if you see a product that's already mostly there, but you tell them, okay, we need to open a mold for the enclosure so it looks like my product. It's going to be the only one that looks like this, and then I don't need that feature, but I need you to add this little feature here. Boom, that's it. Well, maybe in 3 months they're ready to go into production. right? Whereas if you were to develop this from scratch, it would take you 9 months maybe, and a lot more money, right? So what is better? Always keep in mind the risk for your business. And one of the biggest risks is just to be unable to bring your product idea to the market, to find customers that you can reach. Not that simple. How to reach them economically and so on and so forth. And that these customers recognize the value and are willing to give you the price that gives you enough margin to make the whole thing sustainable. Okay, and a lot of companies get that wrong, because at the beginning you're not setting, you're just projecting. You're gonna have the numbers more or less, wrong, like more or less wrong. So some people get it really, really wrong, and they sell at a loss, and they have all kinds of issues. But now think about this: you go into production, you start to sell the product, you start to learn about all that. Now, and you're already making hopefully a little bit of extra margin that will help you finance the development of the second version. What's not to like about that? Now, if your assumption was wrong and you cannot reach a market of customers that are ready to buy, willing and ready to buy at the price that you have in mind in an economical way. Okay, if that assumption is wrong, well, what did you spend? Yeah, you spent a few months, you spent some money, but it's nowhere near what you would have spent by developing your new product from scratch. Okay, so it's some people call it a staircase approach. Not sure where I heard that. Maybe Rob Walling. Anyway, the idea is you go one step at a time, and you don't try to jump directly thinking, oh, an Apple or a HP would do that, or whatever big brand in your industry, they would do that. And just, okay, so that's the way to go. Well, maybe not, right? So risk, cutting the risk as much as you can, learning fast and iterating. Yeah, that's really important. Most companies get that wrong.
I mean, you're testing the market, even if you've launched a product onto the market that's not as unique as your dream product is, your ultimate goal. You're able to learn from that, and then maybe you'll end up making some tweaks to,
Yes.
your the product that you ultimately want to make to respond to the market conditions that you've found, without going bust, which I think is the key point.
Oh, absolutely. If you go with version 2, which is your own product entirely, you own all the intellectual property rights, you finance development, etc., you work with a good contract manufacturer, that product is going to be better, because you will already have a lot of feedback from the market, which you don't have at the time of designing version 1. So version 1, the purpose of version 1, that was in a book by Tony Fadell, who worked at Apple for many years and then launched Nest and sold it to Google and so on. Okay, so Tony Fadell, what he says is that version 1 of the product has a purpose. It is to get feedback from the market that number one, there is a market that you can reach, and you can, then you learn how much it costs to reach them, etc. And you see, what market is willing to pay for your product. And also the feedback about what they like, what they don't like, who is the kind of people or companies that like it. Is it more like early innovators, and so on? But then there's not that many. It's not, it's maybe 3% of the markets like that, but not 50%. I mean, you get to evolve above that. Or is it much more, more conservative, more middle of the road kind of customers? What are they telling you? What do they want, right? And then you learn all that, there's going to be one or two big shortcomings in your version 1 that you're ashamed of. Fine, you're going to fix it in version 2. All right. But if there's a feature that you put in version 1 and you thought it was super important, and actually you see that very few customers actually use it, well, guess what? Just going to axe it. You're going to remove it in version 2, right? So that's a very important point that you made. Fully agree.
Thanks. So I suppose the only way that it's more feasible is if you've got incredibly deep pockets. And I mean, who's got that money to burn these days? I guess that's the point here.
Well, again,
going for fully customized products immediately.
Oh yeah. And again, going for a fully customized product right away with a long list of features so that you don't feel ashamed of it. Even Apple doesn't do that.
No.
They try to. Now, Apple walks a fine line. When they released, what was it? Apple Maps was a little bit after Steve Jobs' death. It was the first major release they made. And they actually apologized publicly, saying, well, sorry, we kind of messed up here. This product is not ready. It's still a beta product. So they tried to walk the fine line between releasing a beta product that's not ready versus something more. But because it's a huge company and they don't want to release something beta, right? Like, why didn't Google release something like ChatGPT, even though they had all the technology, all the advances, all the research, and they had something relatively close, they could have come out with it, but it's a big company. They don't want to release something that's not fully baked. So it's that, $1 billion funded startup, but still a startup, OpenAI, that came out with it because they have no shame, right? They're not afraid. And that's the strength of a new company. Big companies don't dare try certain things, and but guess what? Some customers will be happy with a product that's not a full product. Again, early innovators are it depends how you describe them, but they are between, let's say, 2% and 8-10% of the market. Well, if you can target them as much as you can and reach them economically, that's enough for your version 1. That's totally enough, right? Except if it's a tiny market, of course, in numbers. That's what your version 1 usually should be aimed at.
Good. Yeah, that's really interesting. Sort of dive into sort of the theory of what you should be thinking about, what you could be thinking about when you're developing the new product, and looking at some of your advice and how some of the big boys do it. That was part number 1. So we mentioned there's 9 questions, that we've got up to question 5. Okay, so in next week's podcast we'll cover the rest of them, Renaud, right?
That sounds good. Yeah.
Great. Great, excellent. Thanks for listening, everybody, and stay tuned for questions 5 to 9 of the must-ask questions that anybody who's developing new products often have.
Sounds great.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.